Christmas has always been a bittersweet time for me. When my husband was alive, the holidays meant warmth, music, and the smell of freshly baked cinnamon rolls. He would bring home a tree so big it touched the ceiling, and we would decorate it with our son, laughing until our cheeks hurt. But after he passed, the laughter faded, and Christmas became complicated. My son Daniel married a woman who never truly accepted me. Her name is Victoria. To the world, she was elegance and charm, the kind of woman who knew how to smile for cameras and impress strangers at dinner parties. But behind closed doors, she had a tongue sharper than glass and a heart colder than the snow outside our window. This Christmas was supposed to be special. Daniel insisted I join them at their home. I spent weeks knitting a handmade sweater for my grandson Matthew. He's only 6, and I thought a warm, cozy sweater with his favorite dinosaur on it would light up his face. I also bought a small bracelet for Victoria. Simple, elegant, nothing too flashy but thoughtful. When I arrived, the house looked like something out of a magazine: golden lights, silver garlands, and a giant tree dripping with ornaments. Victoria floated around in a red silk dress, making sure everyone noticed her. When it came time to exchange gifts, I handed Matthew the sweater. His little eyes lit up, and he hugged me so tightly I thought my heart would burst. But then Victoria leaned back in her chair, smirked, and said loud enough for everyone to hear, "A handmade sweater? How quaint. You're lucky we even include you in these gatherings." The room went silent. My son shifted uncomfortably, but said nothing. My cheeks burned. I forced a smile, though inside, I felt something break. That was the moment. The humiliation, the mockery, the reminder that in her eyes I was nothing. Just an old woman clinging to the edges of her son's new life. But what Victoria didn't know was that I was far from powerless. For months, I had been watching her company, a luxury boutique she bragged about endlessly. She thought it was her empire. She didn't know that a quiet investor had recently bought controlling shares through a holding firm. And she didn't know that the investor was me. You know, people think humiliation happens in a moment, a word, a smirk, a look. But really, it's the result of years of little cuts. By the time Victoria mocked my gift that Christmas night, I had already been bleeding inside for a long time. I wasn't always this woman, quiet, reserved, blending into the background of my son's life. Once I had dreams. I was a schoolteacher, and I loved my job. I loved shaping young minds, watching children grow confident in themselves. But when my husband got sick, I had to step away. He needed care, constant care. And I did it gladly. I remember the last words he whispered to me before he passed. "Take care of Daniel. He'll need you, even if he doesn't realize it." I carried those words like a mission. Everything I did for my son. I poured myself into his future, into his education. I sacrificed vacations, luxuries, even friendships. I wanted him to have opportunities one never had. And he did. Daniel grew into a fine young man, ambitious, clever, and hardworking. But somewhere along the way, as he rose in his career, he met Victoria. At first, I was happy. She was polished, confident, well-spoken, everything I thought a successful man like Daniel would want. But soon little things started to show. The first Christmas after their engagement, she corrected me at the dinner table. I had set the fork on the wrong side of the plate. Everyone laughed, but her eyes cut into me. When they bought their first house, I showed up with curtains I had sewn by hand. She smiled politely, then replaced them the next day with expensive silk drapes. When I babysat Matthew as a toddler, she left me a 3-page instruction list, as if I didn't know how to raise a child. And Daniel? He stayed silent. Always silent. Maybe he thought keeping the peace was better than standing up for me. Maybe he was afraid of confrontation. Or maybe he was too blinded by love. But silence can wound deeper than words. By the time Daniel married her, I had learned to swallow my hurt and smile. I didn't want to lose my son. I didn't want to be the mother-in-law who causes tension. Still, no matter how much I gave, it was never enough. One evening, when I brought over homemade chicken soup because Matthew was sick, Victoria looked at me and said, "You don't need to show up uninvited. We're not helpless." I nodded, pretending I understood, but my heart crumbled. For years, I kept enduring these little cuts. Every family gathering, every interaction, She found ways to remind me that I was lesser, old-fashioned, irrelevant, a burden. And the worst part? My own son let it happen. That's why, on that Christmas night when she mocked my gift in front of everyone, I didn't just feel embarrassment. I felt every cut, every bruise, every silence, all at once. But I didn't break. Because by then, I had started building something for myself. When I left teaching, I thought my life's work was over. But grief can change a person. After my husband's death, I began reading about investments. At first, just out of curiosity. I wanted to understand how people built wealth, how money moved in the world. What started as a hobby became a passion. I read books, took online courses, listened to podcasts, and slowly began investing. Small at first, cautious steps. Mutual funds, bonds, a few stocks. I made mistakes, yes, but I learned. And over time, I got better. It gave me something I hadn't felt in years, purpose. And then by chance, I heard about Victoria's boutique. She bragged about it constantly, how she had built it from scratch, how it was her empire. But the truth was different. The boutique wasn't doing well. Behind the glossy Instagram photos and glamorous storefront, the company was bleeding money. Through an investment group I had quietly joined, I saw an opportunity. The boutique was looking for outside investors. I didn't hesitate. Using a holding company, so my name wouldn't appear, I bought shares. At first, a small percentage. Then more. By the time Christmas arrived, I wasn't just an investor. I was the majority shareholder. And while Victoria laughed at my handmade sweater, she had no idea she was mocking the woman who held her company's future in her hands. After that Christmas night, I sat awake in my small house, staring at the flickering lights of my own modest tree. The sweater Matthew had loved still lay folded neatly in my lap, his little hug still warm in my memory. That boy loved me, I knew it. But his mother's words echoed louder. You're lucky we even include you. Lucky. For years I had believed that. Lucky to still be near my son. Lucky to be in the same room as my grandson. Lucky to sit at their table, even if it meant swallowing insult after insult. But that night, something inside me shifted. No, it wasn't luck. It was survival. And survival is not the same as living. I realized then that I had given away my voice, my dignity, piece by piece, just to hold on to scraps of family. But in truth, I didn't need their approval. I had my own worth. And for the first time in years, I wasn't afraid of losing them, because I had already lost them in all the ways that mattered. The thought both crushed me and freed me. That night, I opened my laptop. I logged into the private portal of the holding company I had invested through. And there it was in black and white. Victoria's boutique. Shares owned, 52%. Status, majority shareholder. My hands trembled. I had been buying steadily for months, reinvesting my earnings, staying quiet. And now, without anyone realizing, I had become the owner behind the curtain. Her empire wasn't hers anymore. It was mine. I sat there in silence, staring at the screen, torn between disbelief and a strange, rising strength. For so long, I had felt invisible. But invisibility has its power. It allows you to move quietly, to act without anyone noticing. And now, invisibility had given me control. In the following weeks, I began learning everything about the boutique. Their financial records, supplier contracts, lease agreements. The business was fragile, held together more by Victoria's ego than by stability. Her taste for luxury bled into the company's finances, expensive launch parties, glossy ad campaigns, designer furniture for the showroom. She thought appearances were success. But appearances were debt. I, on the other hand, believed in something simpler. Numbers don't lie. The boutique had potential, but not with her at the helm. I'll never forget the first time I sat in on a board meeting. They didn't know it was me. I used a representative through the investment group. From the reports, I could see how Victoria presented herself, all smiles and confidence, dismissing concerns with practiced charm. But beneath her gloss, panic simmered. Sales were slipping. Inventory was piling up. Suppliers were growing impatient. And yet she carried herself like a queen. The irony made me almost laugh. She strutted around Christmas mocking my gift, calling me lucky, not knowing her own luck was already in my hands. I had two choices. 1. Quietly take control, restructure the company, and push her out without her ever realizing who was behind it. It would be clean, efficient, businesslike. 2. Wait. Watch. And when the time was right, reveal the truth. Not just as a business move, but as a lesson. A lesson in humility. A lesson in respect. My heart longed for the second option. Not because I craved revenge for myself, but because of what she had taught my son, and what she was teaching my grandson. If Matthew grew up seeing his mother mock me, treat me as useless, and my silence as weakness, what would he learn about love? About family? About respect? No. I wouldn't just fix the company. I would fix the story. She wanted me invisible. I would show her the danger of underestimating invisible people. A week after Christmas, Victoria called me. Her voice was sugary, but sharp underneath. Next time, don't bring homemade gifts, all right? Matthew deserves better. We don't want him teased at school. I froze, the phone pressed to my ear. I could hear my grandson giggling in the background, probably still wearing that dinosaur sweater. That was the moment I knew for certain. This wasn't just about business. This wasn't just about me. It was about teaching her, and my son, and maybe even my grandson one day, that respect is not given to the loudest voice in the room. Respect is earned. And it can also be demanded. And so, I began planning. When you've been underestimated for long enough, something powerful happens. You learn patience. Victoria thought I was weak because I stayed quiet. But quiet is not the same as powerless. Quiet can be the calm before the storm. After that phone call, I knew my course. I wouldn't rush. Revenge that comes too quickly loses its meaning. No. I would prepare step by step, until the moment she least expected it. And the moment would come when she believed she had everything under control. The first thing I did was meet with the other minor shareholders. They were mostly small-time investors, people who had put in money because they admired the boutique's glossy branding. But by now they were nervous. The numbers were slipping, and rumors of debt had started swirling. I met them quietly, one by one, through video calls or representatives. I didn't reveal who I was, not yet. I only listened, asked the right questions, and slowly gained their trust. Many of them admitted what I already knew. Victoria was all style, no substance. Her leadership was reckless, emotional, and focused on appearances rather than survival. One of them sighed. She's talented, yes, but she doesn't understand business. We need someone steady. I smiled to myself. They didn't know it yet, but steady was exactly what I had been training to be. Meanwhile, Victoria continued her charade. On social media, she flaunted new collections, champagne parties, photo shoots with influencers. She posted captions like, "Building my empire from the ground up, girl boss." But behind the scenes, bills piled up. Suppliers called, demanding late payments. Employees grumbled about delayed wages. I saw it all in the reports. Every number, every overdue notice. She had no idea her silent investor was watching. My son, Daniel, was caught in the middle, though he didn't know it. One evening he called me. "Mom," he said, "Victoria's been stressed about the boutique. It's been tough. She feels like no one understands how hard she's working." I bit back my words. He didn't see it. The late nights weren't sacrifice, they were desperation. "Daniel," I asked softly, "and how are you doing?" There was a pause. A long one. Then, quietly, "I just want peace." My heart ached. I had raised him to be kind, gentle, to avoid unnecessary fights. But that gentleness had turned into silence, the same silence that let Victoria's cruelty flourish. Still, I didn't push. I only said, "Peace is good. But sometimes peace requires truth first." He didn't understand then. But he would. Over the next few months, I made quiet moves. I consolidated my shares, ensuring my control was airtight. I hired a discreet financial consultant to draft a restructuring plan. One that could save the boutique, but only with new leadership. I worked with the board to schedule a special meeting, timed perfectly for the spring collection launch. It would be Victoria's biggest event of the year. Her chance to dazzle investors and the public. She was pouring everything into it, believing it would secure her reputation. She didn't know the very stage she was building would also be the stage for her fall. One night, as I sat at my desk, I began writing a letter. Not to Victoria, but to my grandson Matthew. My dear boy, one day you'll be old enough to understand that love is not about gifts or appearances. It's about respect. I never want you to think silence means weakness. Silence can be strength, but only if used wisely. And one day, when you see what happens between your mother and me, I hope you'll remember. Kindness should never be mistaken for powerlessness. I didn't know if I'd ever give it to him, but writing it down steadied my heart. This wasn't just revenge. This was a lesson, for my son, for my grandson, even for myself. By the time spring arrived, everything was in place. Victoria was radiant, announcing her boutique's grand launch of the new collection. She sent out glittering invitations, boasted about celebrity endorsements, and walked around with the smug glow of a queen who believed her throne was unshakable. But I knew better. The board meeting was scheduled for the morning after her grand event. And that night, while she smiled for cameras and clinked champagne glasses, she had no idea that her empire no longer belonged to her. It belonged to the woman she had mocked with a smirk, the woman she thought was lucky just to be included, me. The night of the boutique's grand spring launch felt like a stage play. Victoria had chosen an elegant downtown hall, glass chandeliers, velvet drapes, a white runway glittering under spotlights. Every guest wore their finest, cameras flashed, laughter rang out. The air buzzed with money and vanity. And there she was, Victoria, walking through the crowd like she was untouchable. Dressed in a shimmering gown, pearls at her throat, red lips curved into a triumphant smile. She didn't even glance at me. To her, I was invisible. A guest in the shadows, tolerated only because of Daniel. She had no idea the spotlight was already shifting. The fashion show began. Models strutted down the runway in her latest designs, sleek dresses, bold colors, all applauded by the audience. People clapped, whispered praise, and Victoria glowed brighter with every cheer. At the end, she stepped onto the runway herself, bowing, soaking in admiration. She lifted the mic with confidence. Tonight, you are witnessing not just fashion, but the future of our brand. This is only the beginning. Thunderous applause. Cameras clicking. Her smile blinding. I stood still, my hands clasped waiting. Because her future was ending in less than 12 hours. The next morning, Victoria arrived at the conference room still glowing from the night before. She wore sunglasses, holding a latte oozing confidence. All right, she said, tossing her purse onto the table. Let's talk numbers. I know some of you have been worried, but last night proved, the brand is unstoppable. Some board members smiled politely. Others shifted uncomfortably. I sat at the far end of the table. She didn't even acknowledge me. The chairman cleared his throat. Victoria, there's a matter we need to discuss before anything else. Her brows furrowed. Yes. That's when the document slid across the table. Signed. Stamped. Final. The transfer of controlling shares to me. Victoria blinked, confused. Then she laughed a sharp, dismissive sound. This is a mistake. Who signed this? The chairman spoke carefully. Every major shareholder, and the majority holder, is now her. His hand pointed toward me. Finally, her eyes snapped to mine. For the first time, she looked at me, truly looked. What? Her voice cracked. Her? No. That's impossible. I folded my hands calmly. My voice, steady but soft, filled the silence. It's not impossible, Victoria. It's business. Something you never cared to understand. She shot up from her chair, her face flushed. You can't do this. This is my boutique. I built it. I worked for it. You think you can just take it from me? I didn't raise my voice. I didn't need to. No, Victoria. I didn't take it. You gave it away. Every late bill, every careless decision, every moment you chose pride over responsibility. You handed your power to me. Her eyes darted around the room, seeking support. But the others avoided her gaze. They had already chosen sides. And it wasn't hers. For a long moment, silence sat heavy in the room. Then finally she whispered, You planned this. I looked at her, this woman who had mocked me, belittled me, humiliated me at Christmas in front of my grandson. Yes, I said softly. I planned it. The same way you planned to make me feel small. But the difference is, my plan wasn't out of spite. It was to save something worth saving. Something you were destroying. The chairman cleared his throat again. Effective immediately, the board has voted to remove you from your position as creative director. You may retain a minor advisory role, if you agree to cooperate. Otherwise, your involvement ends here. Her face went pale. No, she whispered. No, you can't do this to me. I leaned forward, my voice low but firm. Victoria, the world doesn't revolve around your pride. You should have learned that. But since you didn't, now you will. Victoria stormed out of the room, slamming the door so hard the glass rattled. I sat still, breathing in deeply. Not triumph. Not gloating. Just relief. The silence that had once been my prison was now my strength. Later that evening, Daniel came to me. His eyes were full of questions of conflict. Mom, did you know about this? Did you plan all of this? I looked at him gently. Yes, Daniel. I did. He ran a hand through his hair, torn between loyalty to his wife and the truth standing before him. Why didn't you tell me? He asked. Because my son, I said softly. You weren't ready to hear it. And because sometimes, the only way people see the truth is when it unfolds in front of them. He was quiet for a long time. Then slowly he nodded. I understand now. That night, I sat down and finished my letter to Matthew. My dear boy, the world will tell you to stay silent, to be polite, to endure. But remember, silence is not weakness. Silence is preparation. And when the time is right, your voice must rise, steady and clear, for truth and respect. Never forget that. I folded the letter, placed it in a small box, and locked it away. One day, when he was older, I would give it to him. And maybe then he would understand why his grandmother had stayed quiet for so long. And why, when she finally spoke, the whole room listened. The weeks after Victoria's fall were strangely quiet. For years, her voice had filled every room. Sharp, commanding, dripping with sarcasm. Now the silence she left behind felt heavier than her presence ever had. But silence, I had learned, was not always emptiness. Sometimes it was peace. Word spread quickly through our town. The glamorous boutique owner, the woman who paraded herself as untouchable, had lost control of her own company. Customers whispered. Friends distanced themselves. Even the people who once clung to her side began to turn away. Her arrogance had built her empire, and her arrogance destroyed it. I didn't celebrate. I didn't gloat. Because revenge, when it's complete, doesn't feel like fireworks. It feels like the weight of years lifting slowly off your shoulders. Victoria wasn't ruined completely, but she was humbled. And that was enough. At first, Daniel struggled. He was torn between his wife and his mother, between loyalty and truth. One night, he came to my house. He sat at my kitchen table, the same table where I had shared meals with him as a child. His hands trembled around his coffee mug. Mom, he said quietly. I don't even recognize her anymore. The woman I married, she's gone. Or maybe she was never there to begin with. I placed my hand gently over his. Son, love can blind us. Sometimes we see what we hope is there, not what truly is. But what matters now is not her mistakes, it's what you choose to learn from them. He nodded, his eyes damp. I should have listened to you. I should have protected you. I smiled softly. No, Daniel. You needed to see the truth for yourself. And you did. That's all that matters. Through it all, my sweet Matthew remained untouched by the storms around him. He still ran to me after school, his laughter bright, his little hands tugging me outside to play. He didn't know the weight of his mother's downfall, or the quiet battles fought behind closed doors. But he knew love. He knew safety. He knew that his grandmother's arms were a place where the world was always kind. And that was all I wanted for him. Months later, I saw Victoria at the supermarket. She wore no pearls, no designer coat, no air of superiority. She looked ordinary, human. Our eyes met. For a moment, I thought she might sneer, or throw some biting remark. Instead, she looked down. And for the first time in years, she said nothing. That silence told me everything. Life has a way of circling back. The woman who mocked me at Christmas, who humiliated me in front of my grandson, was no longer standing on a pedestal. And I wasn't the invisible, silenced figure she once believed. I had found my voice again. Not through shouting, not through fighting, but through patience, strategy, and knowing when silence was my shield, and when it was time to break it. One evening, I wrote another letter to Matthew. My dear boy, life will teach you this. People may laugh at you, belittle you, dismiss you. Don't rush to defend yourself with anger. Let time do its work. Let your actions, not your words, prove your worth. Because when the truth finally speaks, it echoes louder than any insult ever could. I sealed the letter, placed it with the others, and smiled. Because I knew one day, when he was old enough to understand, my grandson would read these words and know the strength of quiet dignity. And he would know that his grandmother, the woman once mocked for her small Christmas gift, was never weak. She was waiting. And when her time came, she stood tall.